White people, as a distinct ethnic group, did not come about at a specific point in time. The concept of whiteness as a racial category has evolved over centuries and varies across different societies and historical contexts. Historically, the classification of people into racial categories like white emerged during the periods of colonization, imperialism, and slavery, often as a means of justifying social hierarchies and oppression. It is important to recognize that racial categories are social constructs and that human populations have always been diverse and continuously evolving. Now, I hope that you're doing all right, Majesty. Welcome back to this channel. Please do subscribe if you are not, if it's your first time coming on here, and let's become family. In the concept of this video, the concept of whiteness evolved around the 1600s, the middle of the 1600s, where these things like colonialism, imperialism, and slavery, just started becoming more permanent. I have put together for you some videos that share about this idea, literally white people telling on themselves in a nutshell. Let me roll these clips. I'm gonna be back.
That again, the whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown.
Look, boys and girls, the only reason there are white people is because black people came here first. And they faded as they moved farther and farther north from the equator. Their melanin faded so that their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. Their brains didn't get smaller, but their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. That's the only reason you children can call yourselves white. And you aren't white. We are all shades of brown.
White people did not exist before 1681. Again, white people did not exist on planet Earth until 1681. Number two, any claim that this group called white people Any claim that that group is rooted in biology or derived from genes or biology or is innate or is from nature is a lie.
That's only how long they've been in existence. You got to understand that they only been here 6,000 of their man-made years. So what they did was, a lot of the things that they show you when they showing you themselves sitting like in historical places with us, or they showing you all these old pictures, they really ain't do shit but go back and write themselves in our time. All right, and a lot of us don't know that this was possible, but that's what they were showing you in movies in the 80s, like The Terminator, when he was going back in time trying to stop some shit that happened in the past, because going back in the past, if you can change one little thing, it alters the future. All right, and when you gotta remember that time isn't real.
The now termed white people, like all humans, originated in Africa. The first Homo sapiens emerged around 300,000 years ago, right in Africa. And as populations migrated and adapted to different environments, various physical characteristics, including lighter skin tones, evolved over time. Literally science, you guys. And definitely, as you have heard it, it was definitely to just put some sort of hierarchy to it, to see who is superior. In this case, white supremacy came about, and then they got to realize, oh, they are people actually that we can control, people that we can use. And that's how they really just got the ball rolling and going, and they stole black people's knowledge of self, because you don't even have the time to self-discover the things that you're born into. You think, oh, this is just the normal. It took a while for black people to begin to, fight for themselves and just get out of it. And it's the same mentality that has been transferred or transitioned into generations that have come after until this day. And so, if you have heard it, it's a social construct that has evolved over time to describe individuals with lighter skin tones. But it is crucial to recognize that racial categories are not based on biological differences, but rather on historical, cultural, and social factors. Acknowledging the complexities and the nuances of race helps foster a more inclusive and equitable society where individuals are valued for their unique identities and contributions, regardless of their race or racial classification, which I think is something that is really cardinal here. Sometimes many of black people's things have been put aside, or their inventions, and those inventions have come to be paraded as the white man's inventions, literally stealing from black people. Can we not? History has been whitewashed in many angles, and that is what black people are trying to unpack nowadays. Just recently, people have gotten to discover over time, and now it was even on the news when Putin showed his people a black Jesus, or should I say the world, a black Jesus. And it was not everywhere as before, but when it was national television, stuff like that, I mean, that's just another level. Others were saying he didn't get the memo to say USA will not be happy about that. And others are saying it's just like a get back to USA. I do not know what y'all think about all of this, but it's definitely a social construct, and it's definitely being used even to date as something of hierarchy. White people think they're superior than black people, and we're always being subjected to these white supremacy systems, especially in a white man's world. It's just crazy. Let me know what you think about all of this. Do you think it's a social construct, or do you think it's always been like that? And I agree with that granny who was talking about who said that it's all shades of brown. Like, we are all shades of brown. I don't know how you even get this thing white and black. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Do subscribe if you're not subscribed to this channel.